Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into a topic that sits right at the intersection of history, law, and how the media talks about things. We're looking at the Taiwan Civil Government, or TCG.
That's right. And we've got a couple of main sources to guide us. First, we'll look at what the TCG says about itself on its own website.
And second.
Second, we have this analysis document that digs into media coverage of the TCG, especially how its interactions with AIT, the American Institute in Taiwan, were reported.
So our mission here is to really understand what the TCG claims, look closely at how the media portrayed those AIT interactions, and unpack the international law arguments they're making.
Exactly. We want to kind of separate the facts from maybe the media spin, see what was actually said versus what was reported.
Yeah, because right off the bat, there's this interesting tension, isn't there? You've got the TCG's self-description aiming for normalized status, talking about civil government under occupation law for people's welfare.
They even list addresses for their different state offices.
Right. And then you have the media narrative, particularly from around 2018, which sounds like the AIT just flat out rejected their claims, especially about their ID documents.
Yeah, the whole slap-down narrative, it definitely makes you want to figure out what really happened.
Okay, so let's start there. What exactly is the Taiwan Civil Government, according to them?
Well, based on their website, they define themselves as this group working towards normalizing Taiwan's international status.
And their justification for existing.
It seems rooted in international war law. They argue that in occupied territories, you need a civil government structure to protect the people's rights and welfare. It's quite a foundational claim.
Interesting.
And there's another layer, too. A statement on their site from late 2019 mentions some kind of internal issue. They claim the group was being sort of taken over by paid staff and a self-proclaimed leader warning the public.
That's complexity. And you mentioned the listed addresses for different states?
Yeah. Yilan, Taipei, Hsinchu, Taichung, Tainan, Kaohsiung. It suggests, an attempt at a formal structure across Taiwan.
Okay. So that's their self-presentation. Now let's pivot to how the media, according to this analysis we have, portrayed them, especially regarding the AIT.
Right. This is where it gets contentious. The analysis points to media reports around 2018 claiming AIT basically slapped down the TCG.
Slap down how?
Specifically regarding whether TCG-issued ID cards or passports could be used to enter the U.S. or even just to get into the AIT building itself.
And the language used was strong.
Very. The analysis mentions headlines using terms like "jinock," which is like slap in the face, and "deny," meaning deny. It painted a picture of a real sharp rejection by AIT.
But the analysis we're looking at suggests this might be misleading.
That's the core argument, yes. It suggests those media reports used sensational language and maybe took things out of context. They presented it as AIT directly denying the validity of TCG documents, but the analysis questions if that's an accurate reflection of what AIT actually said.
So what did AIT say, according to this analysis? What was their actual stance?
The analysis really focuses on comments made by Kin Moy, who was the AIT director back then, during a media event in 2018.
Okay.
And it suggests his tone wasn't confrontational at all. Apparently, it was more neutral, cautious, maybe even a bit humorous, not the aggressive slap down some reports implied.
How so? What did he actually say?
Well, when asked about the TCG, the analysis says he started with a smile, even saying something like he was prepared for this question.
Okay, it sounds diplomatic.
Exactly. And his main point, according to the analysis, was just explaining general U.S. law.
Yeah.
He basically said that U.S. regulations require people entering the U.S. to have documents from a competent authority.
Which usually means a recognized government, right?
Precisely. And he apparently extended that same principle to entering the AIT building, you need valid ID. The analysis frames this as just a standard explanation of existing rules, not a specific attack on the TCG.
So he didn't mention the TCG by name in a negative way.
Apparently not explicitly, no. The analysis emphasizes he didn't directly condemn or even name the TCG in that context.
And the humorous part.
Oh, right. There's this anecdote mentioned where he apparently joked, lightly, that maybe he'd have to stand at the door himself to check IDs. It suggests, a light touch, not aggression.
So the analysis concludes AIT didn't actually invalidate TCG documents, just restated standard procedure.
That's the argument. It even floats the idea that maybe some media outlets kind of manufactured a situation like someone trying to use a TCG document at AIT just to create a story.
Wow, that's a strong claim fabricating events. It really makes you think about how news gets framed. So if AIT's response was more general, why did the slap-down idea catch on so strongly?
Well, the analysis suggests possible media manipulation. It argues some outlets might have used those catchy, aggressive headlines and cherry-picked quotes to create that false impression of conflict.
Creating a false issue, essentially.
That's the term the analysis uses, yeah. By framing standard visa rules as if they were a direct rebuke only aimed at the TCG. And it also points out that some media used pretty negative labels for the TCG, like Great Rebellious Organization or Superstitious Fraud Group. Not exactly neutral descriptions.
Doesn't sound like it. Was there a specific incident mentioned about someone being denied entry?
Yes, the analysis mentions a weekly magazine report about people supposedly turned away from AIT with TCG documents.
And what's the counter-narrative to that?
According to the TCG spokesperson cited in the analysis, it was security guards at the entrance who stopped them, not actual AIT officials. And the spokesperson insisted AIT officials never actually challenged the document's validity.
But the media reported it differently.
The analysis claims the media twisted it, saying AIT denied visa-free entry, and there it is again, slapped down the TCG. It also suggests some media outlets might just have a long-standing bias against the TCG anyway for various political reasons.
So motivations from different sides potentially coloring the coverage. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. What about the TCG's own case? What's their argument based on international law?
Right. Their core argument really goes back into history and treaties. They start with the Treaty of Shimonoseki in 1895.
That's when King China ceded Taiwan to Japan, right?
Exactly. So Taiwan was under Japanese rule for 50 years. Then during World War II, you have the Cairo Declaration in 43, saying Taiwan should go back to the Republic of China.
And the Potsdam Declaration in 45 reaffirming that?
Correct. But, and this is important, the analysis points out these declarations were political statements of intent, not formal treaties legally transferring sovereignty.
Okay. So where does the legal transfer argument come in? Or the lack of one?
The key document for the TCG's argument is the 1951 Treaty of San Francisco. In that treaty, Japan officially gave up all rights and claims to Taiwan and Penghu. But, and this is the crucial point they make, the treaty didn't say who Japan was giving sovereignty to. It didn't name a recipient.
So it left a vacuum, legally speaking.
That's precisely the TCG's argument. They contend this left Taiwan's legal status officially undetermined. They also sometimes point to the fact that the U.S. government itself, for a time, held a Taiwan status undetermined position.
And saw Cairo and Potsdam as unexecuted intentions.
Exactly. Those declarations hadn't been formally executed via treaty regarding Taiwan's final status in that view.
Okay, so given that interpretation, Japan renounced sovereignty, but no recipient was named in the treaty. What does the TCG conclude about the ROC's presence in Taiwan?
Their conclusion is that the Republic of China's governance after the war wasn't a transfer of sovereignty recognized by international treaty, but more like an entrusted administration, sort of caretaker role.
And so their goal is?
To establish what they call a Taiwan Civil Government under U.S. military government, basically arguing that the U.S., as the principal occupying power after WWII, still holds ultimate responsibility until Taiwan's status is formally resolved according to international law.
So they're questioning the whole legal basis of the current situation, using Shimonoseki, Cairo-Potsdam's nature, and especially the San Francisco Treaty.
That's the core of their legal argument, yes. It's definitely a specific reading of history and law.
It is. So how did TCG supporters react to all that negative media coverage we talked about earlier, the slap-down narrative?
Well, the analysis suggests they were pretty angry and felt indignant. They saw the media reports as misleading, unfair, deliberately twisting Khin Moi's words.
They defended the TCG.
Actively. They argued Khin Moi didn't slap them down, that it was misinterpreted. The TCG spokesperson also apparently tried hard to clarify the facts, stressing that AIT officials never publicly said TCG documents were invalid.
And they felt it was politically motivated.
Very much so, according to the analysis. They believe the negative coverage was intended to discredit their movement.
Did all that negative press impact their support base?
Yeah.
Weaken them?
Interestingly, the analysis suggests maybe the opposite. It hints that facing what they saw as unfair attacks might have actually, strengthened their sense of unity and resolve.
Like an us against the world mentality.
Perhaps. Some supporters apparently even saw the controversy as a sort of validation, arguing that, hey, at least it got people talking about Taiwan's sovereignty issue, even if the coverage was negative.
So they kept participating in TCG activities?
Reportedly, yes. Despite the bad press, their commitment seemed to hold. So paradoxically, the media fuss, while critical, might have inadvertently raised the profile of the TCG's core questions, even if most people didn't agree with their answers.
Okay, so wrapping up this analysis, what are the big takeaways for us, for you listening?
I think the first is it's really crucial to look past sensational headlines and try to understand the original statements, like the AIT's remarks here. Be wary of oversimplification.
And the analysis strongly argues Kin Moy's comments were actually neutral, not a condemnation.
That's its position, yes. And while the TCG's ideas are definitely controversial, the analysis acknowledges their legal arguments about Taiwan's status do touch on genuine complexities in international law and treaties.
So it calls for a more fact-based discussion.
Exactly, avoiding distorted reporting. It's a call for media ethics on one hand, and for us, the public, to be critical consumers of media literacy, basically.
To avoid being easily misled.
Right, because Taiwan's future is incredibly complex. It needs serious discussion about history, law, everything, not just reacting to rumors or spin.
This has definitely been a fascinating deep dive. We've looked at the TCG's claims, the whole media storm around the AIT comments, and the intricate legal arguments involved. It really shows how important it is to go beyond the surface.
Absolutely. And it highlights how the same facts, the same historical events or diplomatic statements can be interpreted so differently, leading to really strong divergent beliefs.
It makes you think.
It does. And maybe a final thought for you, our listener. When you encounter these really complex issues with conflicting narratives, how do you navigate that? How do you evaluate the information and the role the media plays in shaping your own understanding?
Something to ponder. Thanks for listening to this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.